Welcome to Victory Monday. We are hype. It is the best Victory Monday. It is post week 17. Packers are the number 1 seed in the NFC after demolishing the Chicago Bears on Sunday night last night. It was beautiful. We're going to break it all down. But Maggie, how are you feeling?
I feel good, Robin. This made me cackle during the intro playing. I just loved it so much, and it's everything that the Packers have wanted, and it is right in front of them. So I couldn't be more excited about it.
It really feels like, you and I have talked about it. It feels like the year. Everything is going to come through Lambeau Field, which in a year where home field advantage doesn't really matter so much. That is huge. That is huge for the Packers because the weather doesn't get COVID. The weather doesn't need fans to be there. The weather's always there. So good luck to the Bucs if they have to come up to like a -7-degree snowy Lambeau Field game. I am super excited. We have so much to break down with this win yesterday, 35-16.
Yep.
Sorry, for some reason I thought it was 37 for a second, and I was confusing myself. 35-16, I rewatched it today, noticed a couple of things that I didn't notice while I was like cheering with my friends last night. So let's talk about it. I know, the Packers really took it away, but it was a pretty close game for a good amount. The Packers had what we've seen as a somewhat consistent issue of a little bit of a third quarter stall out, but ultimately they pulled it out and won by 3 scores, so it didn't really matter. What about the offense looked different to you? Did it look different? Did you notice anything, or is it just the same old successful, smooth Matt LaFleur Packers offense running?
I mean, I think like on the first watch through, when it was all happening live, it was like, okay, Dave Montgomery's kind of going to be an issue tonight. And, I was with my dad and I told him, I was like, look, if the Packers get a lead, obviously they deferred, got the ball to start second half, but like once they get a lead, it's game over. And I think that's kind of what we saw is, the other team, it's super cliche, gets paid too. The Bears had a lot that they were playing for. Their offense has looked better the last couple weeks. So I think the defense needed to settle down. And, they had short fields most of the first half. So I think once the Packers also had their opportunities, we really saw them kind of put the game away in the third and fourth quarter.
Yep, totally agree. I think special teams gave them a few. Obviously, they got 3 off of a fumble by Tavon Austin. Stuff happens. He just fumbled the ball. It happens. Pretty impressed by the defense on that, but I know we'll get to the defense later. Offense is just rolling, right? Like Aaron Rodgers looks comfortable. I was potentially worried about the Bears front with no David Bakhtiari. Billy Turner slid in there. I think Rodgers got sacked twice this game?
Once.
Once. Right. Khalil Mack got home once. But I mean, by all accounts, I thought a great performance by an offensive line that yet again has to shuffle around. The run game got going. You saw Aaron Jones just back to form. I think he had like 85 yards and a touchdown on the day. They split him. The one thing I did notice in my rewatch a little bit is that they actually split him out wide a good amount and had either Jamal or AJ Dillon in the backfield or not at all. It was empty, which I loved. I thought that was really fun because Aaron Jones was very involved in the passing game last season and not as much this year. Tons of pony package, which is my favorite. And all the pass catchers got involved. You saw Daphne, the fullback tight end in there, with a touchdown. So I just think your classic spread the ball to all your weapons, move the chains kind of game.
Yeah, it was absolutely the next man up mentality. And, in the locker room or post game, they had talked about like, yes, obviously losing David Bakhtiari is huge, but Rick Wagner, I don't think allowed a pressure, a hurry, a hit the entire game going up against Khalil Mack for most of the game. Guys like Mercedes Lewis obviously are notorious for their blocking ability. So I think kind of what we saw against a really good front seven should just make fans more optimistic for the playoffs and the potential that the offensive line has. And I know Matt LaFleur had mentioned that they might roll out a different offensive line in each game, kind of depending on what the matchup dictates and what the front seven looks like. And, if there's quicker guys that they have to block, whatever. But I just thought that it was a really stand-up performance from the O-line, but that's not really anything surprising given this
I was
season
going to say,
had.
what else is new, right? Like, and I think the broadcasters too were talking about how it's sort of unprecedented how the Packers have so many starters who play multiple positions. Like that is very uncommon. No other team in the league, I think, can say that, or at least if they do shuffle, they're not nearly as successful. And that's a really big deal when you lose a player like David Bakhtiari, obviously one of the best left tackles in the league, the highest paid left tackle ever. Luckily, he got his contract before this injury, so he is, safe and secure. But you lose a player like that, you feel it. You normally really feel it, or that side is now weakened, and it really was just like nothing had changed.
And I don't want to go on like a little rant here or anything, but just I think the moves that we're seeing from Brian Gutekunst, like this once again, is why he is such a fantastic GM. And there was so much, said about the draft and taking a quarterback and a running back in the first and second round, but we didn't know if Rick Wagner would play when they signed him. And we saw Billy Turner slide everywhere, Elton Jenkins slide everywhere. Rick Wagner has been worth his contract. Christian Kirksey had a rocky start to the year and he got injured. And now they're playing him at will linebacker, and he has put together probably his best 3-game stretch of the entire season, ascending at the perfect time. So these little moves that maybe don't get enough credit that we're seeing. Snacks coming in. He played 12 snaps. We'll talk about the defense, but just there's these little things. Dominique Daphne coming in and being a role player when a guy like Jay Sternberger is out for a couple games with a concussion. So just it's been a lot of fun to see the next man up mentality really not have any drop off in Green Bay.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's someone pointed out, like, Aaron Rodgers has the time, thanks to O-line, to go through all of his progressions and sometimes hits like the third or fourth guy.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's a combination of what you just said is like everybody's ready, always ready to get the ball from Aaron Rodgers. Even if he's not looking at you, he could throw it your way. And the combination of that and our offensive line giving Aaron Rodgers all the time in the world to find whoever it is open is a pretty ridiculous combination.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And one of the comments, that was like one of my favorite back-to-backs of the game was when Daphne caught the touchdown, and then on the next play, he just laid out the return man. Like those are guys that, Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur could not say enough about him in the locker room. And I think that that's, we talk about the close-knit nature of this team all the time, and we have all season, but it really just feels like everybody is so excited for everybody else when they make plays, and it just gets everybody else more juiced up to go make their own plays. And it's everything that we've talked about that you would want from this team, and it's all happening at the perfect time for them.
Yeah, and I think there's also something to be said, I saw today that PFF came out with their all-pro team for the season, and the Packers have 5 players on it, which I don't know about you, but that, my eyebrows were raised. I mean, I know, and we know, right? Like watching the Packers all season, we know that we have tons of players that deserve a spot like that. But from a national media standpoint, when you're covering 32 teams, you don't expect to have 5 players. So it's Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Jair Alexander, Corey Linsley, and Adrian Amos. Surprisingly, actually, David Bakhtiari was not. It was Trent Williams. But regardless, that is, it kind of put it in perspective to me that they have all of the right pieces in all of the right places. So to your point, right, of just shout out to Goot and the front office and Mark Murphy, honestly, they've put together a plan that has maybe taken a handful of seasons to sort of materialize, but we're seeing it now and we're seeing success. And I'm pumped for the playoffs. I think the last couple of playoff appearances, I'm usually nervous. Like there's usually a team in mind, and we'll get to the playoffs in a bit, but there's usually a team in mind where I'm like, I'm worried about this team, whether it's the Seahawks or the Niners or the Saints, whoever it is. This year, the Packers are that team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, furthering the point about, and I know PFF isn't the Bible by any stretch, but we're seeing, this idea that the Packers aren't able to finish games. And after the Titans game, Aaron Rodgers had said, consider this our statement. Like there were all these narratives about the Packers not beating enough good teams or maybe needing more weapons. And then to close out the game, the Packers did. They didn't give up a touchdown on any of the drives in the fourth quarter. And, Jair Alexander stuffing Jimmy Graham at the goal line. We'll talk about the defense, but that it really felt kind of poetic, and just it felt like a culmination of everything we've wanted to see from the defense. Normally you think about it, it's like, okay, it's 35-24, 35-27. The game looks a lot closer than it should have been. And this is just, the defense was in some bad situations early. They maintained a field goal, held the team to a field goal when they could have given up an easy touchdown after the Tavon Austin fumble. Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage are two of the best players on the defense. So just everything we've wanted from this team.
Yeah. So let's just wrap up the offense a little bit, because I think there is a lot to be said, right? They came out hot first half. Everything looks great. Obviously stalled a little bit in the third quarter. And when I say a little bit, I mean 2 punts. So not the end of the world by any means. Rodgers hits MVS with a 72-yard bomb. MVS drops a 50-yard bomb. It is what it is. Unfortunately, he gets sacked, and then they have to punt. But the endurance, I think I tweeted this out. It was the endurance of not just the defense, but the offense as well that impressed me, right? You're going to punt. That's the way football works. The defense does their job and you have to punt, but it's a matter of how you bounce back. And I thought that third and fourth touchdown drives at the end of the game just really showed everything. It was just a culmination of everything the Packers do well. Up tempo, Rodgers is getting the ball out quickly, play action, boot stuff to Tunyon and to Lazard, just everything. Aaron Jones running the way he runs, breaking tackles left and right, just looked good. And so it's the bounce back after the stalling, which is something that we haven't necessarily seen at the end of last season or the beginning of this season even, makes me feel like this team knows how to win, and they're not going to, it's the mental side that's been fixed.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we talked about this after the Buccaneers game where, what did we need to see from Matt LaFleur as a coach? What do we need to see from the team? And then against the Colts and the Vikings, even though they dropped those games, there was that dog mentality that they always talk about where they weren't going to give up regardless of the situation. And we've seen the Packers in some tough situations where they could have easily rolled over. They could have easily, given up more points than they did. And I think these last 2 games were some of their best of the season. And it's happening at a good time where they know everything that they want is in front of them. And they have talked repeatedly about having other teams come to play in Lambeau. And you mentioned it at the beginning of the show. I mean, fans or no fans, Mother Nature is home field advantage. And Davante Adams said it in his presser, we are more confident playing in weather. And we know that the opposing team is less confident having to come handle the elements. So there's all these little mental tricks now, I think, that this team has where they know, look, the only team that can beat us is ourselves until we get to Tampa. And that's what we heard in the post game conferences is just, look, we are excited to be the number 1 seed. We were excited to win the North, but we're still checking boxes, and the biggest box is yet to be checked.
Right. Okay, so we've mentioned the defense because I think we're both really excited to talk about the defense, which is that they have now finished the season at number 9, which to me, I know that they've been playing well, but I'm still so shocked in the best way, of course, at that end of season ranking. But to be fair, they have kept their opponents in their 6 of the last 9 games, I think it is, to 20 or less points, which in what has been a very high scoring league in general this season is very impressive. You mentioned all the key guys out there, right? The Smith brothers, Rashawn, the entire secondary, just playing absolutely lights out. They know what they're playing for here, right? And they're playing their best. I agree with you. I love the move that Pettine did with Kirko. Chris Barnes is now sort of that, middle linebacker with the green dot on. It's working well. Adrian Amos.
I love him so much.
Yeah. I want to go back to our pre-season episode because I remember us so distinctly talking about Savage and Amos and how they will likely end the season as one of the best safety duos in the league, and they are. And it's clicking at the right time, right? And yeah. So defense looked good, right? Of course, it's the Bears, and I think we also said this last week, the Bears offense has a ceiling, and all you need to do is get them to play at or below that ceiling force Trubisky to do Trubisky things and throw a turnover, which he did. He almost had 3. I think King let one slip through his hands. Chandon Sullivan let one slip through his hand. Jair almost let one slip through his hand. So we got 1, and that's all that ended up really mattering because that led to the last touchdown drive and pretty much the dagger. I love the way this front is playing. I think they're playing so well against the run right now. David Montgomery is a different back than Derrick Henry. He's shiftier. He reminds me more of Aaron Jones, honestly, than a Derrick Henry type. And they kept him pretty much at bay. They look ready to go for the playoffs.
Yeah, and Matt LaFleur had said that. He said anytime you play an offense and you give up 16 points, and the comments have mentioned it too, you had plenty of points come off of a couple special teams gaffes. That's 3 points on a couple different field goals. The first, obviously, opening touchdown, they started at the 40s. So the defense held up. They allowed 69 yards on the ground to David Montgomery. And Matt LaFleur had basically said post-game, yes, 16 points cumulatively obviously is good for your defense, but the litmus test now is the playoffs. And, he credited Mike Pettin. He credited the run defense and said they've really kind of rose to the occasion because they knew that was their Achilles heel of the team was that run defense. But they're going to try it out in the playoffs. Whoever comes to town is going to lean on the run game regardless of the weather and see if the Packers, can back up what they were doing kind of in the final stretch. So I think that
Good
arrows
luck.
are right. I think it's a positive sign that we're seeing it. All signs point to, yes, them actually having a handle on things, but we still saw improvement from the defense.
Yeah. I think and you and I talked about this offline, is that, you've got Kenny who's really, really back to peak Kenny Clark form. I know that Snacks played pretty limited snaps, but I noticed him at least in the limited snaps that he was playing. That tandem with Kenny is going to be great in the playoffs. Even Rashawn Gary, I think he obviously has set himself up. He's an edge rusher. He's a rusher. He rushes the passer. That's what he was drafted for. But he's setting the edge, and he's helping in the run game immensely. He had 5 tackle for a loss. So they're doing what they need to. I think forcing another team to run is exactly what the Packers need. You're not going to pass against our secondary, and if you run the ball, you don't score as much. And so then you do let the Packers offense potentially get a lead, and once you let the Packers get a lead, it's kind of game over, unless the Packers do something to shoot themselves in the foot. So sure, run the ball, drain the clock. The Packers are still going to score 30 points, and you're not going to have enough time to come back from that deficit.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting, though. We talked about that kind of in the middle of the season, and I remember you saying it on Pax. What she said was just, Mike Pettin, sometimes it feels like his best asset is when the Packers are playing with a lead, and very rarely in the last month or so of the season have the Packers played from behind. And when that happens, just by nature, other teams are not running the football as much because they're not able to, because they need those chunk plays through the air to get back into the game. So I think that kind of is one of the strategies going into the playoffs. And, the secondary is peaking at the absolute perfect time. If there are 30 inches of snow on the ground at Lambeau Field in the divisional round and you can't run the ball without slipping, then, somebody on Twitter a couple of years ago coined the term snow fly zone. And that's kind of what this defense is predicated on is, run first. But then when the Packers build a lead, you're unable to run the ball, and then the secondary plays shut down. And I think we kind of saw that in the second half against the Bears with this secondary and the front seven even. Everybody was playing so much more freely. There were so many pass breakups because guys were just getting really physical and getting to the ball for those breakups, and that it's everything you want.
Yeah, well, the Packers are one of the best teams in the league when they play press man.
Yep.
So if you allow the Packers defense to get into a situation where they can actually play that more because you have to pass the ball because you're behind, then that's just a positive for this defense. It's not going to end up well. And I know that it's not great if there is, if the Packers have to catch up. It works well when they build a lead. And that's one of the, I guess, knocks against Pettin. Someone asked in the comment section, how do we feel about Pettin? Do we still hate Pettin? I think that it's working partly because the Packers offense is just on a roll and they're averaging like 32 points a game. I think also the players are executing better. I think there's been some adjustments, right? Like we haven't seen any more 3-man rushes. And they're playing not as soft at the line, although were a few like third downs where I was like, really, guys, like, why are you 8 yards off the line? I think they still need to get better at short yardage conversions. Like, you let the Bears convert 4 out of 5 fourth downs. Like, that can't fly if you're playing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So there's still some things that I think that need to be fixed and cleaned up, including tackling, of course. But I still think that likely Pettine is still gone. I just see LaFleur bringing in his own guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's interesting. You know, Matt LaFleur had said the bend, don't break mentality, and that's, you know, what Mike Pettine's defense had kind of been predicated on for the last 2 seasons, is the idea that you can bend, but then in the red zone, you tighten up. And it had always, like, somewhat worked. But now they have the offense to kind of match that mentality where, you know, last season they tried, but Matt LaFleur was in year 1 of introducing his scheme, and the offense just wasn't rolling enough for that to be successful. And now in year 2, you have the perfect marriage of an offense that can score a ton of points and then a defense that can play lockdown in the red zone. And I think we're kind of seeing that, like, what was it, 1 out of 5 red zone conversions for the Bears, and then they ended up kicking field goals. And, you know, do the math. If those field goals are touchdowns, this is a much closer game that the Packers are kind of struggling to hang on to. So that bend, don't break, I think, kind of found the perfect marriage with a Matt LaFleur offense that is finally firing on all cylinders.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we don't love the bend, don't break, right? Like, you'd rather just cause 3 and outs, but that's not realistic. Like, teams are going to score against you. It's not going to, you're not going to shut down every single team that comes your way. So rather field goals. And someone, I think it was one of the announcers actually last night, that said, if you're going to just keep taking field goals against the Green Bay Packers, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Like, you're just going to lose. Okay, so I want to talk about the playoffs a little bit, although I guess we should touch on special teams. Do we want to?
Okay, so I saw somebody on Twitter actually mention, you know, the Randall Cobb situation, because that's what I thought of right away when he went out of bounds and then touched the ball to kind of extend the sideline and give them a 40-yard or the ball at the 40. And I understood that, but it really, to me, looked like Patterson slipped. And I thought...
Really?
It literally, to me, I thought he slipped on the turf. So the call made sense, and I felt like whatever they called on the field would stand because there wasn't enough to overturn anything. But to me, at first glance, I thought that he fell out of bounds. But apparently I'm in the minority and thinking that
he did that on purpose.
Well, I know he did, but I thought he slipped before he could do it, like trying to do it. So I thought that his foot was in.
Yeah, that was an interesting way to start the game.
It was.
That was like, but it ultimately didn't matter, which I love. Like, sure, start the 40, score a touchdown. It won't matter. I thought it was a little bit of a blown call. Someone said that actually just here. I didn't love it, but I also think that's probably just my Packers bias coming out. I think that for the playoffs, like, they just need to be competent. Just don't fumble. Just don't give the other team an opportunity, and we'll be fine. I wonder if we will have someone else returning besides Malik Taylor, because he's just sort of milquetoast.
That's a really actually unique way to put that. I was trying to think of like timid, I guess isn't the right word, but he always seems like he's thinking about just trying not to make a mistake. And, you know, to be fair, that's worked for him. He's been okay, but yeah, Robin said it in the chat, like, fair catch everything. Somebody on Twitter said put Jamal Williams back there because even if he doesn't get you a ton of yardage, he's got like some of the best hands on the team. Absolutely. You know,
and he'll power through guys if need be. Like, he'll always get a couple extra yards.
Yeah, you just need them to not make special teams gaffes and you're fine. Like, they don't have to be Superman in the playoffs. And if you're playing at Lambeau Field, kicking an ice ball in windy weather, like, special teams potentially will come into play here. So yeah, just don't make mistakes.
Yeah. So I guess just looking back on the season, because the regular season is over, year 2 with Matt LaFleur, another 13-3 season. He's 26-6 in his head coaching career. He actually has a better win percentage right now than Bill Belichick, which obviously you take with a grain of salt because Bill has been calling plays for much longer. But I still thought that was cool. Total culture change, total seamless, successful regime change, which you can't stress enough does not happen very often. I mean, you look at how many head coaches got fired today and how many teams have cycled through coaches and have not found success. And somehow the Packers go from Mike McCarthy to Matt LaFleur and we're cruising to 2 byes in the playoffs in his first 2 seasons. I mean, it is so impressive what he has done. The respect and like the camaraderie and locker room mentality that he's created with his players, for a pretty like quiet, unassuming guy. They seem to really rally behind him in a very special way. So just have to give like a lot of kudos to Matt LaFleur, because you're also coming to an organization that fully expects to win. Like you don't have a grace period with the Green Bay Packers. That is a winning organization and a fan base, as we know, that can be quite harsh if you're losing football games. So for him to come in and do what he's done has just been so impressive.
I mean, he came into a fan base that is still bitter about the draft when the Packers are 13-3 and have a first round bye in the playoffs and are the number 1 seed in the NFC. But
not us, not these fans.
I'm just saying, like, all right, good luck, Matt LaFleur. But no, it's absolutely. And I think one of the best parts about him is just that he's so complimentary of everybody else. Like, he gives so much credit to Nathaniel Hackett and Adam Stenavich and Justin Outen and everybody that people are like, hey, no, can we talk about you really quick? And he's like, absolutely not. It's because I have Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and Jair Alexander. Like, I felt like the last 5 minutes of his post-game presser was him listing everybody on the team.
Yeah.
And talking about the contradictions.
You love a humble guy. You love that. Yeah. He's firmly in Coach of the Year talks. I was listening around the NFL podcast today, and it's like not even a question. He will get votes. I don't know if he'll win. That would be wild if a Green Bay Packer head coach won and Rodgers was the MVP, but he's definitely at least garnered like the attention and the respect that I think he deserves around the league too.
Yeah, I think Brian Flores wasn't a really solid choice. I don't know if missing the playoffs does anything. Right. Kevin Stefanski, I thought, had it locked until they lost to the Jets, but then he brought them back and they made the playoffs for the first time in 18 years. So he kind of feels like a front runner. You know, McDermott, there's a lot of really good options. Ron Rivera with Washington, but.
Right. True. He does deserve it. He coached through cancer. But you have to kind of give a shout out to Matt LaFleur because you can't say that, yes, Aaron Rodgers is playing at the level that he's playing, but he's playing at the level he's playing because Matt LaFleur's scheme is working. So yes, right. He walked into a situation where he has one of the best quarterbacks ever to play the position, but he also had to somewhat revitalize a pretty just, what's the word I'm looking for? Toned down Aaron Rodgers to what we've seen earlier in his career. And he did just that. And there was so much hype around his ability to bring Matt Ryan to an MVP in his second season. And it almost felt like hyperbole at that point because it's just like, there's no way that this is going to happen. Like people are just saying this to say it. And yet here we are. And Aaron Rodgers is the undisputed MVP of the 2020 regular season in his second year with Matt LaFleur. And you realize like that was a phenomenal hire.
Yeah.
Just so happy. Just so happy. And you get the sense too that sometimes I think head coaches are tied to their quarterbacks in a way where they can't find success when that quarterback leaves. I don't think that that's going to be the case with Matt LaFleur.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned Bill Belichick, and I think that's like we're kind of seeing now in the first year without Tom Brady what that looks like. And that's not to discredit Bill Belichick as a head coach, but he's had him forever. And that's kind of what makes it so interesting. And, Mike McCarthy was with Aaron Rodgers for his entire career. And he unfortunately lost Dak Prescott. That wasn't really fair to the Cowboys offense to get a good gauge on what he can do now back in the league. But absolutely to your point, like you see, I think good coaches, like the Browns are always my go-to, but Kevin Stefanski and Baker Mayfield, like it takes a special coach to get the best out of Baker Mayfield when he is notoriously good at play action. You have to get the ball out of his hands quickly. Like Kevin Stefanski designed a playbook and a scheme that took the Browns to the playoffs on the shoulders of Baker Mayfield. And for Matt LaFleur to kind of bring this offense in that Aaron Rodgers maybe wasn't sure of at first, and now he's realizing, I think Ben Fennell said it on Twitter today, like Aaron Rodgers can be Clark Kent and this offense is bananas. And he's still being Superman because he's Aaron Rodgers. But the offense is designed in a way that Aaron Rodgers can be human and it still functions really well. And whatever happens with Aaron Rodgers, whenever he retires, hopefully rides off into the sunset with 3 more Super Bowls and then, leaves Green Bay. But whoever the quarterback is for Matt LaFleur, I think we'll see that same kind of scheme designed to them.
That's absolutely my thought process as well. So we're obviously geeked up about this team. It was a really special season. I think that no matter what had happened, just having a football season this year would have felt special, and yet somehow they exceeded all of my expectations. Yeah. The whole league did. Honestly, it was just a great season. I watched more football this year than ever in my life because I have nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. But we have potentially 3 more games ahead of us to watch, and there's some interesting matchups that could happen for the Packers. I'm wondering, because Andy Herman asked me and Alex asked me this question last night when we were recording Pack-A-Day, and I kind of gave a cop-out answer. But they said, like, who's your ideal divisional round opponent to come up to Lambeau?
Oh, you're asking me? I thought you were going to...
Yeah, I'm asking you. No, okay. I'm asking you. I want to know your answer.
Jacob Westendorf, I don't know if he's still in the chat, but we talked about this on Pack-A-Day a couple weeks ago. And at the time, the Rams offense was but I thought the Rams defense could give the Packers some struggles because, I mean, they're the number 1 ranked defense in the league right now. And, I thought that might be a tricky matchup. But after seeing everything play out the last couple weeks, I kind of agree with you that there's not necessarily anybody that I'm too worried about. But to me, if I had to pick my least ideal matchup, and I think that'll probably end up being the case, is
your least ideal.
Yeah.
Like the worst matchup.
The worst match.
I'm wondering what your ideal matchup is. Like, who do you want to come up for the divisional round?
The Bears. And as the 7th seed.
Okay, but your least favorite then.
Least favorite is probably the Bucs, just because I think it'd be some of that, like, that guarded feelings from 2019 where the 49ers gave the Packers fits and then they played in the NFC Championship game and still gave them fits. Like, I do think Tom Brady's going to look different in the winter, but he's Tom Brady. And as much as nobody wants to talk about him, he's first ballot Hall of Famer. He's a 6-time Super Bowl champion. Like, get him anywhere near
in the wild card round last year.
I'm just saying, get him with a really good offense in the playoffs, and we don't know what can happen. So,
okay, that's fair. I actually kind of would love to see the Bucs come up and just have a little rematch of that game, but obviously only if it goes well. I actually think I would like to have. I mean, obviously the Washington football team, because that offense is bad. And honestly, the way our offensive line is playing, like, sure, Chase Young is a beast, but he's also, like, that team is full of players who have never played in a playoff game before. And they just have their front 7, right? And I think the Packers offense would just have a field day with the Washington football team if they happen to beat the Bucs in the wild card round and make it to Green Bay. I think that's the best case scenario to me. Yeah. Rams would be second because I have no idea what is happening with Jared Goff. He just had thumb surgery. Are we going to get John Wolford in Green Bay in the playoffs? I mean, sign me up for that too. So there's a few options for me. Obviously my, sort of least favorite of them all is always going to be the Seahawks. Like, I don't want that. But just the idea of anybody coming to Lambeau will always make me feel like the Packers will have the advantage.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you. And, they kept showing the clip on Twitter, and I think they talked about it even on the broadcast, but Aaron Rodgers looking at Jordy Nelson going, we got to get one of these at home. Like, we're always on the road. We just have to get an NFC Championship game at home. And I don't think that the Packers will take that for granted. I don't think they'll overlook the divisional round. That's not really what I'm worried about. But, you have talked about this on Packs What She Said. You've talked about it here, where it just feels like Aaron Rodgers knows how close he is. And it's going to take a freaking army to stop that man from getting to the Super Bowl.
I think I said this to you when we were talking to Rachel, and I just I've believed it for years. This is not like a this season take. Like, I have always said, if the Packers make it back to a Super Bowl, Aaron Rodgers will single-handedly, if he needs to, drag 51 players, an entire coaching staff. He will drag them to the Lombardi. There is no way that that man who knows what a second ring means to his legacy and knows how hard he works and knows how much he deserves it. Not that deserve is the right word to describe a sports league, right? A sports league where like you have to earn everything that you get. But to me and to anyone who watches football, deserves that second ring. Like he is not going to let that opportunity slip through his fingers. And now that he has kind of a redo in potentially having an NFC championship game at home because 2011 didn't end up happening, I just don't see him letting this go. And we've talked about all season how he doesn't have to be Superman because this Packers team actually functions in a way that elevates his play without him needing to like be strenuous about it, I guess is like the way I would describe it. Yet we know that he can. We know what he is capable of when he is on that adrenaline and he is like, I'm winning this game. Like we have seen it before, not this season, but if he needs to, he will drag an entire 52-man team to a Super Bowl ring.
Well, and I mean, you and I talked about this. We've talked about this before the season started. We've talked about this just as fans of a football team, but we're by nature optimistic fans. We love the sport of football and we just cherish getting to watch the sport of football. And, you know, whatever the Packers do normally, we're like, hey, could be better, but I'm just enjoying being a fan of this team. I have legit never, probably, I don't even know if I felt this way in 2010, looked at a Packers team and thought that they had a better shot at getting to where they want to go. You know, as outsiders, as the 6th seed in 2010, you know, that was historic and impressive, and that was a phenomenal run. But looking at the way this team is now, we talked about it, like 2016, there's been years where they make the playoffs and you're like, okay, like it was a dream. Last season. It was a dream to get to the postseason. You're like, okay, that was cool. But this season, and I've tried to be so guardedly optimistic, but I'm having a really hard time keeping myself in check because it feels like everything is kind of coming together the way that we have yet to see a Packers team come together in a very long time.
I just feel like I try not to get my hopes up because I feel like when I do, I end up being let down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like if you take all of the fan bias out of it and you look at the NFC picture and you break down each team that could potentially come up to Lambeau, like I can visualize the Packers beating each team in like very specific ways. And of course, each of them have strengths, right? That could potentially lead to the downfall of the Packers. We saw it with the Bucs front. I think that their offense has really started clicking since we played them too, in a way that is different. I mean, obviously they're talking about the Mike Evans injury in the chat right now. We don't know what that's going to mean. That could be huge for the Bucs. You're right. It's Tom Brady. He has all that experience. You get the Rams and Aaron Donald, who is just a game wrecker in and of himself with Jalen Ramsey back there, like an impossible tandem, but an offense that doesn't scare me. We talked about Washington football team. We see what the Seahawks are doing. They're not playing their best football, even though they still have Russell Wilson who can win a game. Each team has a weakness, yep. And the Packers do too, but each team has a weakness that I feel like the Packers and Matt LaFleur can exploit, just like they have all season. And as long as they don't shoot themselves in the foot and make mistakes, don't turn the ball over, don't give them short yardage if you fumble on a special teams punt recovery, like things like that, I find it hard to imagine the Packers losing a game at home in the playoffs when they know what's at stake. I think also, and I don't know how much this goes into it because I'm not a professional sports player, but I also wonder, you know, when you lose a guy like David Bakhtiari, if that's even more motivation. Say, like, that's our guy. Like, Aaron Rodgers said they were grieving, which, like, that's a strong word to use, which shows how much David means to this locker room. Like, I can imagine, especially as, like, Aaron, who's one of his best friends, or any other offensive lineman, to go out there and say, like, we're winning this for you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there was part of that in 2010 where Charles Woodson and Donald Driver, not even counting the injuries leading up to the Super Bowl, but in the Super Bowl, you lose your best player on defense. You lose Donald Driver, who had been playing for years and years and years to get to that moment. Like, I think there is kind of that mentality of, like, rallying together. And, you know, to your point about being, like, every team having a weakness, I think that this is one of the most complete Packers teams that we've had the pleasure to watch in a really long time. And yes, you can look and say, this is how you beat this Green Bay team. There's this and this and this. But it genuinely feels like if you look at the team on paper, they have the least amount of deficiencies. And like you said, if you play a mistake-free game, or you keep yourself doing your brand of football, and obviously it's any given Sunday and any team can come in and surprise you.
And everything restarts when the playoffs start, to me, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But if you play Green Bay Packer football, like, have fun in Tampa. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, if the Packers do what the Packers have been doing this season, go have fun.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so let's see if there's a few questions. I did see a few questions in here. Hi to Aaron Nagler, who has joined us. Happy to have ya.
Hey,
not really. Everyone's just really hyped now for the playoffs, as we should be. This one's specifically for you.
That's a lot.
I think we kind of answered all of the questions. Are there any playoff surprises, like any upsets that we think are going to happen? That's really hard to predict.
I mean, you and I had talked about, if Washington is the team, their front seven against Russell Wilson or Tom Brady was really intriguing to me. And I know the Browns are doing it with the Steelers, and you have the Rams and the Seahawks. I'm not a big fan of teams having to play 3 times in a season. I think there's always surprises there, and there can be upsets that you maybe don't expect. So I shouldn't have necessarily maybe said that I want the Bears to come to Lambeau Field, but I also am highly confident that if the Bears are the team standing between the Packers and a chance at a Lombardi, bye Bears, I'm sorry.
Like, if they somehow make it past the wild card round, yeah. I find it hard to imagine the Bears leaving the Superdome with a win, but crazier things have happened in the Superdome in the playoffs, so I wouldn't put it past. The
NFC North plays them tough in the playoffs, apparently. Maybe the Bears be like the Vikings and just...
Okay. I don't love this question because I'm not negative enough for this question, but it is a good one. The most disappointing player from this season.
Do you want me to start? Is that why you're looking at me?
I can't think of anything.
I think, to me, as far as like, it doesn't have as much to do with the player, and maybe that's a cop-out, but Al Lazard. And it's just because we lost him for so much of the season with a really significant injury. And, we had talked about Allen Lazard kind of getting to emerge as wide receiver 2. And we've seen that we don't necessarily need that from this Packers offense with MVS and EQ and Robert Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis. And there's been a bunch of guys who have been role players, but I was really excited to see what he could do in kind of like a breakout season, especially after the Saints game where he had put together like a really good first quarter.
Let's see what he's got in the playoffs, baby. You never know.
I would need that as a gift. Just so good.
I think and it's not his fault because he's been injured a bit, but Jay Sternberger might be my choice. Because I feel like I also put some unnecessarily high expectations on him just because I was super hyped about the pick when we drafted him. But again, tight ends take time and he's been hurt. So let's see what he has in his third season. Big Bub has done his job. J.K. Scott's an interesting one. Well, I said this on Cheesehead Live show, and I know I was kidding, but I really can't stop thinking about it. I want Pat McAfee to come out of retirement and come punt for the Packers.
Can you imagine if they just waved J.K. Scott on the way to Tampa, stopped and grabbed Pat?
And Pat just punts in the Super Bowl, wins the ring with his buddy Rodgers. That would be amazing.
Is he in the Berg still? Is he in Pittsburgh? Because that's kind of a detour on the way to Tampa.
We are going to have a show next week. I don't know if it's going to be end of year awards. We haven't decided what we're doing yet, but stay tuned. I like that idea. But stay tuned. Come join us next Monday. Alan, you obviously don't watch very often because I very much talk about Jair Alexander a lot on this show. Don't worry. He gets his love from me. Probably too much love. They're probably sick of me talking about the Packers secondary all the time.
Look at my shirt, Carrie. If anybody's sick of anything, it's probably not you. Okay.
We're having an episode next week. Game On Wisconsin will be having all of their shows next week. Even with the bye week, it'll be full of great content as normal. This is a great question that we're going to end on before we wrap up. Erin, my girl, who is going to be the Packers player that emerges in the playoffs?
I feel like it's cheating because I feel like we've already seen this player emerge, but it's Darnell freaking Savage, and he's gonna have like a game sealing Al Harris pick.
Is he gonna do a Nick Collins situation?
I mean, I was thinking to get to the Super Bowl, but yeah, absolutely in the Super Bowl too. Get
a Tramon Williams pick in the end zone against the Falcons.
There you go. Now, see, Joey the Jaguar was absolutely right that you just bring him up however you can. Okay, that means Snacks has to get a pick 6 in the NFC Championship round, a la BJ Raji.
Okay, great. No, I can see Savage having a Nick Collins type postseason for sure. That's the comp that I've seen thrown around, and it's high praise. But I actually think the way he plays and the kind of player he's growing into, it does fit. I'm gonna say AJ Dillon because I really feel like what we saw out of him from the Titans is not a fluke. Like, you give that boy the opportunity and he will do things with it. Obviously, Aaron Jones is the number one back. He should be the number one back, and he will be. But I really think, given the opportunity, AJ Dillon will have maybe not a repeat performance, but close enough, especially in another sort of snowy, cold Lambeau Field situation. Maybe it's just me manifesting what I want to happen and putting it out into the universe. But I think that he's an untapped resource, and he's fresh legs in the playoffs. Those are few and far between. Words are getting hard as I finish my beer. Okay.
I love you.
All right, thank you all so much for joining. Really active chat tonight, really fun. Love just all your comments. It's we read everything you say, by the way, so don't worry. No, Maggie's not drinking a ginger ale. She's drinking a green 19 in celebration. I would do the Aaron Rodgers voice, but I don't want to embarrass myself and get clipped in a video, because I know people would do that. So thank you all for joining us. There's no Monday Night Football game, so go enjoy your evenings, enjoy your bye week. We'll be back next Monday for a preview, and I don't know, we'll surprise you with what we do next Monday.
We'll do something fun,
we'll
like
be
always.
here. So bring your drinks, bring your questions, bring yourselves, bring your comments, as long as they're nice. And and we'll see you next Monday. Packers are the 1 seed, and we just went 13-3 in what was a special and phenomenal season. So soak it up and go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.